Japan. A tiny, tiny island with a culture about as famous and far-reaching as is possible. Its stories, its landscape, its industry, and its food touch every single part of this globe that we live on. Very few places seem to kind of master that combination of both boldness and delicacy that Japan do with their food. It provides both ingredients and whole dishes that could be incredibly bold and umami, or subtle and super gentle, unlike anywhere else in the world. Not to mention the level of intricacy and elegance that goes into even the simplest of Japanese dishes. Tempura, ramen, wagyu, sushi, tofu, sashimi, miso, they're all words that we in the West are now well acquainted with. But they also all have something in common. They're also very much centered on the savory. Because something that the rest of the world hasn't quite grabbed from Japanese culture yet is dessert. The more adventurous or well-traveled among us will have had a few frozen mochi before, or perhaps some kind of dessert or cake or treat with some matcha involved in there. But how much do we actually know about Japanese sweets? Personally speaking, almost zero. I'm someone who's a bit of a nerd and very, very well acquainted when it comes to, Western European treats and desserts, from French to Austrian to Italian to British, and of course through media exposure and being held against my own will. I'm joking. Also, American dessert culture is kind of very much famous and something I'm very familiar with. However, I know almost nothing about Japanese desserts, which is one of the things that made me so excited to get into today's particular episode of Desserts of the World, which, if you haven't checked out the series before, you can find all previous episodes of here in the channel. We've been to Mexico, we've been to Italy, we've been to New Zealand, we've been to Ghana, we've been not everywhere. We definitely haven't been everywhere, but we've been, pinballing all over the place so far. Dango are sweet, chewy little dumplings, typically served skewered on a stick. They can come in, as far as I'm aware, a variety of different kinds. The kind today we're looking at are known as Hanami Dango and are typically skewered and snacked upon in the springtime when the blossoms begin to bloom, which is why they have that kind of gorgeous pastel pink, white, and green color scheme. These little things are so popular and beloved, they even have their own emoji if you are an iPhone user. And while they might not be kind of the most iconic or most beloved or most widely eaten Japanese dessert, it's definitely up there. They are a form of what I believe is known as wagashi, which is a form of kind of small bite-sized treats that are typically eaten in a kind of celebratory manner with tea traditionally. And while there are a wide variety of different kinds of dango, of different kinds of wagashi in general, I couldn't get past both the simplicity and the kind of uniqueness of this dessert. I personally have never seen or eaten or made anything like it, and that's kind of what drew me in. The way I would kind of crudely describe them to any, Anglo-Saxon viewers or also to any kind of Italian viewers that I may have are almost a kind of sweet, chewy gnocchi. But I mean that in a complimentary sense, because I love gnocchi. And as odd as this very uncultured description is, I do mean it as a good thing. It's unlike anything else I've ever eaten. The flavor is incredibly simple, with just the most kind of subtle sweetness to it and this really gentle, natural rice flavor. Super quick, super visually appealing, and super fun to eat too. But enough chat, let's make some Japanese Hanami Dango.
Somewhat unsurprisingly, today's recipe begins with some ingredients I have never used before, including glutinous rice flour and silken tofu, or tofu vellutato here in Italy. And basically with this lovely jelly-like soy substance, you're going to want to mix it with that glutinous rice flour and just a little bit of sugar, a lot less than you think you would need, and just kind of mix them all together. I just used regular caster sugar, but I believe you could probably also use granular sugar, granulated sugar in this too, rather. Mix it up with a spoon, or if you like, you can get your hands straight in there. I mixed it with a spoon just up until the point it was getting kind of clumpy and hard to stir, at which point I got a pair of clean hands in there and mixed it together until it was a dough like this. I then just laid it out onto a piece of greaseproof paper, but you could also probably just flour the surface, and kind of made sure to knead it until it was nice and smooth before chopping it into 3 roughly equal different pieces. setting one aside to make up the kind of white component of the dango, and getting the other two ready to colour and knead to create our green dango and our pink dango. For the green shade, I just used a pinch of matcha tea powder. I believe you could also use some green food colouring if you like, but the matcha was something I had and also something that added a little bit of flavour too. Similarly for the pink shade, I just used some red food colouring, but I have heard of people using freeze-dried strawberry powder. Once the colouring and flavouring was added and kneaded kind of evenly throughout, I cut the big dough lumps into smaller dough lumps. You should get 8 to 12 out of this amount of dough, depending on how big or small you would like your dango to be, before preparing a big old pot of water. Bring it to a rolling boil and cooking the little dough balls in batches just until they begin to float and bob around. This takes anywhere between kind of 3 and 5 minutes, and once floating, shock them in cold water just to stop the cooking process, and just repeat until you have lots of lovely cooked dough balls. Then, as is tradition, I skewered the dango onto a little bamboo stick and serve them up ready to eat. I imagine these would also be fabulous with a dip, even if it's not traditional, but these at this point can then be served warm or cold, ready to be snacked and happily chewed upon and enjoyed. Thanks for watching.